Welcome back, dear listeners, for another installment of Twilight Abridged. The chapter begins by picking up with the story of Carlisle's history. This chapter also confirms that they are not vampires, and that they will not forfeit their existence by starvation. Vampires, which rely on blood to maintain their resemblance of life, require the life of other beings, particularly their own former kind, and usually by way of blood, to exist. If they do not feed, they die. It is this consumption of life that binds them in undeath. The only vampires in literature to forego the consumption of life and remain in undeath are Terry Pratchett's Black Ribboners, and this only works well because Pratchett writes satire. It is a joke. Also, they can pass over water without difficulty, which is another thing to indicate that they are not of the undead. Edward also does a bit of puppeteering, getting her to promise to not run away. You might try to argue this, but then you'd have a tough time explaining why he smiled after she did make the promise, if he were truly trying to warn her. If it were a matter of his truly thinking she would flee, and that she even should, such a promise would not be something to smile about, especially if he actually had her best interest in mind. Also, reflexively, as in, reflexively, his eyes flickered to another picture. This is definitely a blatant instance of thesaurus rape. This would actually make the sentence mean, his eyes directed back to themselves when they flickered to another picture. Otherwise, it would be a matter of reaction. However, nothing had occurred for him to react toward. After all of Carlisle's history, we're treated to only a few brief blurbs about Edward's background. Basically, he rebelled against Carlisle for hardly a few years, during which he had attempted to become something of a vigilante. But he was too emo to even prey upon murderers, saying that he felt guilty the entire time. At least that had the potential to have been interesting. They go to Edward's room and he showed Bella his music collection. Then Alice and Jasper enter and talk about playing baseball in a storm that night, and the chapter ends. Thank you for joining me for another installment of Twilight Abridged, brought to you by the good people at TwilightSucks.com. Twilight sucks because the only interesting thing the characters have done is in their backstory.